Pardon me, sir. Oh, let me guess. You thought I was dead. You thought I was 6 feet under, buried under dirt. No. I'm very much alive, guys. I'm very much alive. I've just been taking a small break from this whole YouTube shit. But I'm back. I'm back to talk about some boxing. And I'm going to talk about Alexander Povetkin's chances against Anthony Joshua. Because you guys know that he has absolutely no chance in hell on defeating Anthony Joshua, right? You guys know that, right? Matter of fact, Alexander Povetkin has less chance in being able to beat Anthony Joshua than if Alexander Usyk were to move up to heavyweight and challenge Anthony Joshua. Yeah, I would actually pick Alexander Usyk to have a better chance in giving Anthony Joshua issues than someone like Alexander Povetkin, because Alexander Usyk is a better talent than Alexander Povetkin, despite the fact that he might not be a bigger puncher and he's a natural smaller guy. But that's besides the point. Why am I so confident that Alexander Povetkin is an easy fight for Anthony Joshua? First of all, he shot. And I'll tell you why he's shot. Because he's old. He's 39, which means he's old. And there is no fighter who is in their prime at 39 years old. I don't care what anyone says. If you're 39 years old and you're a professional fighter, you are old. You're not in your prime. A young fighter is anywhere between 18 years old till about 32 maximum. Once you get past 32, you start looking old. You start fighting old. All right? It's rare to see a Bernard Hopkins. I understand that Bernard Hopkins was 46 years old, still winning belts. But that's 1 in a million. How many Bernard Hopkins do you see these days? You don't see it. Because by the time fighters are Bernard Hopkins' age, they're shot to bits. Better yet, they're retired, right? So it's rare when you see fighters at that age still being able to be dominant. Or unless you're Floyd Mayweather Jr., who hardly took punishment throughout his career. So he can still be 39, 40 years old and still perform at the high level of boxing. But the majority of fighters take punishment. And because they take punishment, that wears them down. That puts a lot of mileage on them. And it takes a lot of their youth away. It takes a lot of their reflexes away. Alexander Povetkin has been a professional fighter for 13 years. Right? He turned pro, I believe, back in 2005. It's 2018 now, so he's at the end of his career. 13 years as a pro. 39 years old. Alexander Povetkin was a guy who always took punishment in his career. Right? He was in a war with Marco Huck. He got beaten up by Vladimir Klitschko. Right? He was getting spanked and countered all night by Carlos Takam. Even David Price, hurt Alexander Povetkin and had him stumbling back to the freaking ropes. So Alexander Povetkin is a guy that he's had a lot of mileage, and he's fighting a young, hungry guy who's in the prime of his career. Right now, Anthony Joshua is at his peak. This is probably the best version you're going to see Anthony Joshua in. 10 years from now, Anthony Joshua, if he's still fighting, he's going to look like a shot fighter. If you compare Anthony Joshua now to if he's still fighting 10 years from now, you're going to be saying, man, look at how much Anthony Joshua slowed down. He's so slow. His reflexes are done. His timing is off. Because right now, he's at the peak of his career. This is the best version of Anthony Joshua, while this is the worst version of Alexander Povetkin. So Anthony Joshua, a young, hungry, modern-sized heavyweight, is fighting a short, last-generation size heavyweight who's past his prime. Again, Alexander Povetkin is not a modern heavyweight. He's a last generation heavyweight. You know, a decade ago, the biggest heavyweight was really Vladimir Klitschko. If you remember, a decade ago, Vladimir Klitschko seemed to be the only guy who was 6'6", right? Every time Vladimir Klitschko fought somebody, they were always about 6 feet tall, 6'2", 6'3" maximum. But Vladimir Klitschko was always the tallest guy at heavyweight. Every time he fought someone, he was taller than them, right? Because last generation, the majority of heavyweights were regular size. And what I mean by regular size were they were, you know, the size of, 6 feet, 6'3" maximum. If you were 6'3", you were considered tall. But what happened in the last 10 years? In the last 10 years in the heavyweight division, a change happened, and these heavyweights became so much taller. Now, every time you see a heavyweight, if they're 6 feet tall, if they're 6'3", you think to yourself, man, this guy's a midget. He a midget. Why? Because the majority of heavyweights are all over 6'4", 6'5", right? Joshua, 6'6". Dillian White, 6'5". Parker, 6'4". Wilder, 6'7". Jarrell Miller, 6'5". The majority of these top heavyweights are all over 6'5", 6'4". They're all tall. So 10 years ago, when Alexander Povetkin first turned pro, he was a modern size heavyweight back then, because back then it was normal for heavyweights to be 6 feet tall, right? So back then he was considered normal size, and it was weird to see someone like Vladimir Klitschko being 6'6", 6'7". But now it's been 10 years, and now, like I said, Povetkin is now last gen, right? He's last gen. He's like last gen graphics, last gen consoles, right? He's not these modern size heavyweights. These modern size heavyweights are bigger than him, are taller than him, are younger than him, are more ambitious than him. He was struggling with a past his prime modern size heavyweight in David Price. David Price managed to hurt Povetkin. David Price is past his prime. David Price was never the best fighter at heavyweight. Yet he managed to hurt Alexander Povetkin. What the hell do you think is going to happen when Joshua fights him? Joshua was a much better fighter, much better talent than David Price. Joshua is what David Price was supposed to be. People wanted David Price to be the Klitschko killer. People thought David Price was going to be the next Lennox Lewis. They thought he was going to be the next great UK heavyweight champion, but he never turned out to be that way. He turned out to be a fluke. He turned out to be a guy who had no chin. The guy who ended up taking that throne as the next great British heavyweight was and is Anthony Joshua. Alexander Povetkin will... I'm not going to say will. I shouldn't say will, actually. I would say I won't be surprised if he gets knocked out via uppercut. He's a one-dimensional fighter. Povetkin fights in one way. He comes straight down the pipe, walking down the line, and he throws hooks because he's a short heavyweight. He's a short 6 feet, 5'11" heavyweight. He fights one way and one way only, and that is coming forward with no defense, throwing hooks, trying to knock his opponent out. How do you beat a guy who's coming forward, who's short, throwing hooks? You box him. You move. You throw a jab in his face to snap his head back to have him respect you. Look at how Klitschko, every time he was trying to get close to Klitschko, Klitschko would throw a jab directly in his face, but Klitschko was also doing some, dodgy shit where he was, leaning on him, putting his body on him. He was bullying Povetkin. But you want to know what the best thing to do against a short guy is? You throw uppercuts. Joshua loves throwing uppercuts. I'm telling you, man, I've been watching Joshua, homie. He loves throwing those uppercuts. And guess what, buddy? Povetkin loves walking right into uppercuts. So do not be surprised if Povetkin gets rocked. I mean, seriously rocked with an AJ uppercut. And don't be surprised if after AJ rocks Povetkin and hurts him and has him on Queer Street, has him doing that same dance he was doing when he got rocked against David Price. Don't be surprised if AJ, because he's a killer, if he goes for the kill and he ends up stopping Alexander Povetkin. I don't see Povetkin being able to get past AJ's youth. I think this is more of a youth thing. Youth and talent. I think this is going to be the changing of the guards. It's a young, hungry, modern-sized heavyweight who's a puncher, who has power, who has ambition, who has motivation, versus a past his prime heavyweight, a last gen heavyweight who's short, who just knows how to fight one way. Alexander Povetkin is not improving as a fighter. He just fights one way. He's fought the same way now that he fought 10 years ago. While Joshua, because he's young, because he's ambition, he's still improving as a fighter. He's getting better and better. So it's going to be a time. That's why I say I think right now Joshua is better than the best version of Alexander Povetkin. Because right now Alexander Povetkin's at his worst. He's at the end of his career. But even when he was at his best, when he was in his prime, he really just fought one way. That's what I'm saying. I believe he fights. He's better than that version of Povetkin. And again, the last thing we have to keep in mind is the fact that he's off that juice. He's not taking those drugs. You know, Povetkin was injecting his ass with steroids. The power's gone, people. I'm telling you, when Povetkin was on drugs, he was knocking people out left from right. Povetkin was knocking out people left from right when he was on drugs. Now he can't knock out Andreas Rudenko. Now Andreas Rudenko. Now he's going the distance with Christian Hammer. The power's gone, people. I'm telling you, the power's gone, and it's because of those drugs that were off his system. Again, I expect this to be an easy fight for Anthony Joshua. And that's just my opinion, guys. And I'm back. And you can't stop me.